Good, good. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can.
All right. Great. How are
Is
things? What's that?
this okay?
Yeah, this is great. No, this is perfect. Yeah. How are things? What have you been up to this summer?
Uh, Moving.
Yeah. Are
So
you
we're
all moved in now?
yeah, we're settled we're settled here in our house in Exeter and it's been great. We It's been good. So most of our summer so far was just focused on packing and getting ready to move and that type of thing. And now that we're settled and the kids are settled, yeah, well, it's nice. I mean, being here, we're, close to the beach, so every weekend we'll include some type of beach activity, or
Nice.
we've got a trip planned up to Bar Harbor, Maine for a weekend. We got some friends and family coming in to visit us in August. So it's nice. We're
Great.
excited to be back in this area and feel home again, which is nice.
Great. Yeah. So we'll just get right into it and talk, and then we'll kind of go from there. So besides coaching, what's your other role at Exeter going to be?
I'll be a member. So at Exeter, there are a number of sports where the head coaches are a part of the physical education department.
Yep.
Um, and so at Exeter, if you're as a ninth grader, if you're not a varsity athlete as a ninth grader, you're a part of what's called the prep program. And so the prep program involves afternoon activities, all sports related, strength and conditioning is a big focus of it. So it's being a supportive member of that team, working with our ninth grade prep program, which is a 2 hour block uh, in early afternoon. So it's nice. So, my day to day consists of supporting that program for a couple hours, and the rest of it will be focused on uh, coaching coaching the team and preparing the team and practice and player meetings and all that type of stuff that comes with running a team. In addition, I will be an advisor, so I have
Oh, great.
advisees as well. So I'm looking forward to that. And I just think it's great. I really missed being a part of the prep school environment. And so I'm excited to get back into it and be a part of the community.
Right. Because you were at Hill for a few years, and
Yeah, I was at
then
Hill for 3 years.
right, and then we're doing some work with the Penguins. Is that right?
Correct, correct. And so, over the past 10 years, my 4 years at Harvard, my 3 years, I'd say, I guess 8 years, my 4 years at Harvard, my 3 years at Hill, and then the year with the Penguins, I really missed like that 7 years of being a part of a school environment.
Right.
Um, and the boarding school obviously is different than college, but
Right.
still being a part of the school environment was something that, um, Exeter's kind of a tweener. Exeter feels like, now that I've been here a week, it feels like a small college.
Right. For sure.
You know what I mean? Versus like the Hill is very concentrated. It's a small campus. It's enclosed. This is very much, if I said to you, "Hey, this is a small college," and you didn't know anything about it, you would think it was maybe bigger than some small colleges.
Yeah, I went to Colgate, and I think Colgate's not significantly larger than Exeter. Like Colgate's probably in the 3,500 range, and Exeter is like 1,100, right? Somewhere kind of in that range.
1,200,
1,200.
but it's an expansive campus and it's part of
Right.
the downtown. So there's really there is campus, but it's integrated with the town. So it feels much bigger than maybe I mean, I've learned a lot in the past week. Like this 1,400 acres here of campus, which is just massive, you know?
Yeah, I was on campus twice last fall there, and it is like shockingly impressive and large, and like all of the facilities, like it's an amazing place. And I know for me, when I'm talking to families about it, yeah, it is. It's in some ways a really different feel than a lot of other prep schools because of the size. But like, I think they're, as you hit the nail on the head, it's still not college, right? And so the way that like the structures that are in place to deal with adolescence is really different than it is for college. But it is a hugely impressive place to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so it's cool. It's exciting. It reminds me a lot of Harvard in some ways, how Harvard is
Yep.
integrated into Cambridge. You know what I mean? With Harvard Square and all that type of stuff. So it's great. I love the feel and I'm really excited to be here.
So was the thought for you, like you said, thinking about getting in back into prep schools, or like you saw, like obviously Exeter is such a unique opportunity when that popped up? Was it something you were like, hey, this would be great if this could work out for me?
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting the timing and how everything happens for a reason. You know what I mean? This was
Yep.
one that at the time, this is going back maybe last January, where we spent 3 years in the Philadelphia area, um, and being from Boston, and my wife is from the New York area. We started feeling like, okay, Philly wasn't bad because you were still East Coast, not far from New England.
Right.
It was good. And then when we went west to Pittsburgh, I don't know what we were initially thinking, but once we got there, we were like, whoa,
It's
we are
different.
far.
Yeah.
This is Midwest. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, I remember driving my son to a game in Detroit, and it was like driving. Being from Boston, you fly to Michigan. You know what I mean? Like you
Right.
don't even
For
think.
sure.
And I remember calling my wife saying, I just passed the sign entering Michigan, like it was driving from New Hampshire to Massachusetts.
Right.
And I was
Yep.
like, wow, we definitely are far. And then so we got into the winter and we started realizing, okay, our family is spread out. My son's looking at colleges. He's playing junior hockey. My daughter's looking at colleges. We got to really figure out where we want to be. My daughter got into BU,
Oh
and
wow.
so she was excited to get back to Boston. And that fueled our parent juices, being like, okay, our
Yeah.
daughter's going to be in Boston. Our older son eventually will hopefully end up in the Boston area as well, playing college hockey. Um, and so I put we started thinking, geez, what do we want to do really? Because I had to make, some decisions, whether to really commit to Pittsburgh or not, right? Like, and I was talking to Paul Pearl, who's a close friend of mine. We
Yep.
worked together at Harvard, and I said, I'd love to get back, I think, to the Boston area. But if the right job opened up, like it has to
Right.
be the right job. I mean, having been at, you know, a college like Harvard now with the Penguins, like I just didn't want to take any prep school job. And when you think about it, you know the world well, like there's only certain areas too that really, for our family, made sense.
For sure.
So we lived in Maine for 12 years. All my kids were born in Portland, Maine. So the Seacoast area is what we consider home, right?
Right.
Long story short, Paul Pearl was at an AD meeting, an FSAC AD meeting, and happened to be talking to the director of athletics here at Exeter and said, "Hey, we're going to be opening up our coach search here very shortly."
Yeah.
Paul called me right away and said, "Hey, Exeter's job is open up. Jump on it."
Jump on it. Yeah.
So I said, well, it's a no-brainer, right? There's only one Exeter, and
Right.
it's the Harvard of prep schools. Uh, and then I talked to Teddy Donato, who also had some information on the job as well. And anyway, long story short, it's like anything. I jumped on it, and through your professional network, it all worked out. And I'm just fortunate that, it was a large search, as you can imagine. And I'm fortunate that I was humbled and fortunate to be selected for the job in early March.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so like I think there's, as you know, great coaches in prep schools from different backgrounds, but yours is so unique because like you were, yeah, I don't know how many other prep coaches have experience both like at the professional level, the college level, and now multiple prep schools for you. So it does create a unique vantage point. And then also, yeah, you're right. There's some dynamics which we can talk a little bit about, right? Like Exeter is a little bit different. So like having that experience at Harvard, I would imagine also is going to help here as you start trying to, figure out what your roster is going to look like here for the next couple of years.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So it again, it all worked out well when I remember telling my wife about the opportunity, and she was ecstatic about this. So I guess as you look at it, right, like it checked every box in terms of professional, personal, family wise, and then as I got into the process with the administration, um, Exeter's in a unique position where the program was so successful for a long time, right? It has it had taken a step back over the last few years as they went through the transition of
Yep.
Dana retiring. Um, and so now it's not just I think as we look at this strategically, it's not just as simple as just recruiting players, right? Like
Right.
you got to factor in the academic component, the alumni component, there's a financial component. There's some strategic planning components that come with looking at facility upgrades and alumni support, and so I think my collective background in all of that, and then the recruiting aspect, you need to have a global network, a nationwide network in terms of being able to attract players to a campus like Exeter. And fortunately, I've been able to develop that over my 30 years. And so it's been fun. It's been early here, and I've only been on campus a week, but the last few months, just talking to talking to administration, talking to recruits and families, I think there's a renewed excitement around the program, which I'm fired up about.
Well, from my end, right, like when I'm dealing with families, I'll get a lot of families who, they know prep school because they've been in the hockey world, but they don't really know prep schools, right? And one of the first questions I'll always ask them is like, okay, well, like, do you, they'll be honest of like, we don't really know anything. And I'm like, okay, well, are a couple of schools, can you name a school? Or are they schools no? And like, Exeter is always the one where like, well, I've heard of Exeter. They may have no idea actually what it is or anything, but it's a name. And so I always think the interesting thing for you, and obviously you've got great people in your admission office, is like I feel like the challenge sometimes for a lot of prep coaches is that idea of like, well, their school might be a totally unknown entity, just because like there's great schools out there that like people just don't know about.
Right.
Exeter is this place where I think lots of people know about it, but understanding that like the process that I think that Exeter goes through really thoughtfully to make sure that the students who are going to be admitted are going to have a likelihood of having success and having a good experience there beyond the hockey piece is just it's a different thing that happens there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's one thing that I think that's where my experience from Harvard was a benefit in um, the appreciation for that balance, right?
Yeah,
Between the finding a good hockey player, one that has a future potential in playing college hockey, but at the same time enjoys the classroom, is a strong student, and appreciates wanting to be part of a high academic, high performing community like Exeter. And I think that's my that's the exciting part for me is trying to find and recruit those student athletes that appreciate both sides of the fence.
right,
Um, and they're out there. They're certainly out there. And I think as the junior hockey landscape evolves daily here, part of my message is, you can come to Exeter and achieve both of your goals.
right,
One doesn't have to take a back seat, right? And I said this to you, I think hopefully I will never have to find 18 hockey players again in a given class,
right,
right? So as I if a family is looking at this as, hey, we really want to get into Exeter, the 25-26 school year, this next admission cycle is the greatest opportunity to do so because I need such a large pool of players. You know what I mean?
yep,
And as I go through that evaluation process, I'm balancing those 18 players out, right? So
yep.
I want a group of ninth graders, I want a group of 10th graders, so on, and be able to balance that class out so that I get on a cycle of 6 to 8 players a year versus having that need for 18.
And I think, oh, that's great to hear. Also, too, for me, I think with all of the changes with junior hockey and everything that's going on, as you said, like the opportunities I think that are going to exist, not just at places that like Exeter, but at all prep schools in the coming years for younger players to be able to have these opportunities is going to be significantly different than it may have been in the past, right? Like I think, like you said, the chance for ninth and tenth graders to be able to play is going to be really different than maybe it was, you know, certainly 10 years ago, and maybe even as close as 5 years ago. So it is a really different thing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think the next year or two is going to be very interesting to see the impact to prep school hockey. Um, I do. The question I've asked myself is reclassing. How much of an impact is reclassing going to have
Yep.
or not have, right? Because I truly believe you're going to need a player's going to need to have 2 years of junior hockey
Yep.
experience. So, when depending on the birth year and the age and when their birthday is, if you reclass, does that still allow you 2 years of junior hockey eligibility on the back end, right? Um, and then that determines your entry point too. Like where this, the customary response was, oh, I'll go repeat my junior year.
For sure. Yep.
Now it's okay, but if you do that, are you going to lose a year of junior hockey experience on the back end versus come as a sophomore, come as a ninth grader, graduate, maybe not reclass, and then still have your 2 years of junior hockey on the back end, right? So now it becomes a 6-year process potentially or 5-year process. So I don't know. I don't think anybody has a crystal ball,
Yeah,
but these are things that I think about now that as I'm paying attention to the landscape.
for sure. I've seen it more like in this last admission cycle. I saw it more from the higher end hockey players that I've had, parents, and even some of the players, but even some coaches who were really thoughtful around like, hey, maybe it's not the right thing for you, right? Like maybe coming in as a ninth grader or tenth grader maybe makes more sense. The other thing I talk to families a lot about, and I think this is and I think for whatever reason in the last couple of years, that push for, oh yeah, we're going to go to prep school as a repeat 11th grader for in the hockey world, this became something people thought about without recognizing. I talk to families a lot about this, like the implications from an admission standpoint of what that means. Like, at a
Yeah.
place like Exeter, the opportunities to be admitted as a ninth or 10th grader are significantly different than they're going to be in just the number of 11th graders overall the school is going to admit. And so for me, I've always tried to, I think fought back against this idea of later is better, where I think there is opportunity for good players, but also from an admissions standpoint, it's just a really different process for a ninth grader than it is for an 11th grader.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think again, no one has a crystal ball. I think it's on a case by case basis. For example, for a younger player the trajectory is potentially Division I hockey and a high level of junior hockey, that's going to be different than someone that might have a lower trajectory and is more
For
geared
sure.
towards a NESCAC program that may only I don't know if I would recommend. It might be better for that player to reclass,
Yep.
get a full 3 or 4 years at Exeter, graduate from Exeter, and then play 1 year of good junior hockey, and then go into an SCAC program. Again, it all depends on the player. You know what I mean? And like I mean, it's becoming more and more difficult to play college hockey.
Right.
So for the player that is a lacrosse player first and just wants to enjoy his prep years, you know, maybe they are reclassing because lacrosse, it's a good thing to reclass,
Yep.
right? On the hockey side, it's not going to have much of an impact, but they're still going to be a prep school hockey player.
Yep.
So anyway, we'll deal with it on a case by case basis, but it's going to be fun and interesting to kind of evaluate the landscape over the next couple of years.
So for you, I know, like, yeah, you need a big number of guys. So that means probably a busy summer and fall for you of like obviously, I think the always the thing is like Exeter is going to have it's never going to be at a shortage of kids who are interested in looking at Exeter, but finding those the right fits and like not only from an admission standpoint, but obviously with what your needs are going to be from a hockey program, like what does that mean for you like the next couple of months? How are you planning that out?
Yeah, now that it's funny you said that because I just kind of mapped out my recruiting
Yep,
schedule for July and August. And I've said to myself, okay, I need to first and foremost, we need to move, get the family settled.
right.
And up until this point, it's been, I've paid attention to the spring market and I've got some good relationships where I've stayed in touch with coaches
Yeah,
and families. But over the next now 6 weeks, I'm going to zero in on, I've got my office now. I'm working on my depth chart and really focused on my needs. And going to see as many hockey players in person through camps, tournaments, whatever it might be, to just start to identify one, kids that have reached out to me,
yep,
right? So one thing I've said to kids is, hey, tell me where you're playing this summer, so I can go to the games and watch you. I have a list of kids that I'm going to go see that I have been referred about, right? And then I'm purposely going to certain college camps
yep,
um, that because I know those kids are they have academic goals,
yep,
right? They have certain Ivy League camps or NESCAC camps. I'm going to be at working those camps in addition to paying attention to um, the players obviously. And so yeah, I guess the easy answer, Brad, is over the next 2 months I plan on being
be
in a rink
everywhere.
as possible. Yeah,
Yeah. Do
yeah.
you have a sense yet? And I would imagine this is, as much as I think there are certainly parallels between like Kawasaki, like certainly like a place like Harvard and Exeter. I always tell people, families like the one big difference in prep schools is that the funnel, particularly at the top, has to be so much wider, right? Like, so the number of players that like when you're looking for a big number, the number that you've got to get into the applicant pool, particularly at a place like Exeter, where, yeah, the admission process is going to be competitive. It's always going to be a competitive process. Um, so for you, like, do you have a sense of like how that, like, what those numbers look like yet for you in order to get like, how many players ultimately you feel like you need to push through that funnel to get to where you need to be?
I have a sense, but it's funny you ask because I do have a meeting coming up next week with our admissions, my admissions liaison to really lay the groundwork of
Yeah,
what that as I begin to get out there in person watching players play, part of that is okay, I want to know how many players I need to have in that funnel, right? So I am meeting with my admissions liaison next week to start to finalize what that game plan looks like because the reality is I guess first and foremost, I'm gonna have a starting point, right? Like
right.
one of the things that I won't waste my time on is, and I know this is cliche, but if they're not a good student,
Yeah,
I can't even entertain it. So one of the
right.
first questions I'm asking is, I need to see your transcript. You know what I mean? Because if they're not a solid A, B student, um, I can't waste a second of anyone's time
Right.
evaluating that profile, right?
Yep.
The testing component, they've got time to test, as you know,
Yep.
right? So what I've been saying to families so far is get me a transcript and start working with a tutor or start focusing on the SSAT preparation process. When you test, you have a deadline that's up to you when you test. But the test
Right.
scores obviously the greater the test scores, the more balance we're going to have in terms of how the transcript looks,
Right.
right? The lower the test score, the higher the grades need to be. And so it's a balancing act. Recommendations come into play. My recommendation obviously comes into play big time. But to your point, yes, I plan on meeting with our team and having a clear plan on okay, if I'm going to need 17, 18 players, we're probably looking at a pool of, you know, 40 players
Right.
uh, type of thing. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's Yeah, but yeah, that type of that type of plan will be in place here very soon, and that is the thought process.
And that's the part I think for me, which is so often hard for me to get families to understand of like that is the difference between like prep school and college hockey. Where in like college hockey, in most programs, Harvard's obviously a little bit different, but still is the likelihood of like, look, if you need 10 guys, you're probably going to be able to go out and offer 10 guys, and in all likelihood, you're going to get your 10.
Yeah, and
Like
they're gonna get in.
in prep school, that's not going to be like that's just not how it's going to be to work. And also, I always tell families too, it's so the hard part for coaches is you may have a great kid who's really excited, who wants to come and does get admitted, who for very good and valid reasons within their family, they decide now's not the right time to go to prep school. And so that dynamic of, yeah, I think it's I think a lot of families will be shocked to hear you say, like, well, you know, he's at Exeter. Like, if he needs 10, 12, 18 guys, like, he's just going to go out and get his 18 guys. Of like, it's not how it's going to go, right? Like you
Right.
said, like, you're going to need to, it's a really different kind of process.
Absolutely. But I will say this is why I've stressed it with, from a recruiting perspective, um, this is the one time
Mm-hmm.
that we're not going to want to not end up with a good hockey team,
For sure. For sure.
right? So if we need just simple math, if there's five returning players from 25, 26 to 26, 27, and I have a roster of 22, that means I need 17 players.
Right.
Well, I can't only have 12. That means I'm stuck with only 17 players. It won't be I won't be able to achieve what we want to achieve, right? So
Right.
that's the exciting part. If I'm a family,
Yeah.
the school is excited about, hey, we need to support boys hockey in the admissions process to make sure. Now, again, I can't bring in 17 seniors.
Right.
Need to have, so that's where, okay, I need, a group of freshmen, a group of sophomores, some PGs, some juniors, whatever, however I balance it out. This will be the one time in my career that we need a large class,
Yep.
right? So to your point, yes, 100%. It's got to be the right profile. I may not get, as an example, let's say my pool of 40, right? I may not get my top 17 that I I rank or I suggest, but I may get 25, 26 on the
Right.
list because they're a better profile for our admissions department academically. That's still a good hockey player,
Yep.
right? Or lacrosse may have a number one recruit that's also a hockey player that I may
Can
have to
play a
take that
role for you.
player,
Yep.
right? But the point is, it still creates an awesome opportunity for a student athlete based on the need, right?
Yeah. For sure. No, and I think that's a great point of like there is this unique opportunity. And I know even with talking to some of my families about like, hey, this is like there, as we talked about, like I'm gonna have more kids. I think it's gonna be on their list, so the opportunity might be there for them. Where in past years, maybe it was gonna be a little bit more challenging. And so like
Right.
I do think there's some great thing. And I also think the other point for you guys, which is a little bit different, is I talk to families a lot about these things that schools think about acceptance rate and yield, right? Of like schools are really focused on their acceptance rate and their yield. And for so many schools, the yield part can be challenging for a coach of like, well, as you said, okay, if I need five guys and even if I got my top eight guys admitted, I might only get two or three of them to say yes. Exeter is a place, again, because of reputation and facilities and obviously that where I would imagine that for you guys, that group you're going to get, the likelihood of you yielding those kids is going to be a little bit higher than maybe it is at some other places.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. It's going to be. I'm excited to go through the process. I think it's going to be enjoyable. Um, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I was so excited about coming to Exeter and the opportunity is I really missed working with good kids, good families that want to have the balance between the two,
Yeah,
right? The academic goals, the athletic goals, the two sport athlete. Um, I really missed that profile, and I'm really looking forward to going through this admission cycle with evaluating what is that pool of 35, 40, what does that
yep,
look like? You know what I mean? And then getting to that final number because you're dealing with even if you end up with the 25th player in that list, you're still dealing with a great prospect. You know what I mean?
for sure. Yeah, and I always tell families too. I think that the some of the misconceptions, at least from my vantage point, around how the admission process at Exeter or your peer schools, right, within some of those 10 school organizations, is that idea of like, well, it's this you've got to have this GPA and you've got to have these test scores. And I often remind families like that's not really what the admission office is. What they're trying to decide is like, do they think you can be successful there, right?
Mhm.
And like for different kids, they're going to be able to demonstrate that in different ways, right? Like and different kids coming from different backgrounds. That's gonna be something that the admission office talks about. So it's not so much how well has he done. It's like, do we think he can be successful here? And if we do, then that's a kid we're going to be considering giving an opportunity to.
Absolutely. And I think that's through through my coaching process with any recruit is making sure they understand that it's not just about the transcript or not just about the test score. It's, the recommendations are critical, right? From your teachers. Um, your interview is critical on how you carry yourself, how you conduct yourself, how you communicate.
Yep,
Uh, me from a coaching perspective, right? Are they coachable? Are they going to be a good citizen? Are they going to be a good neighbor in the dorm? Like there's so much of the different pieces of the puzzle that come into play that the admissions team is evaluating all of them collectively, not just one piece of the pie.
yeah, yeah. And I've always in some ways really admired the admission office there of like how thoughtful they are in that process, and like a place where I think they could just be like, well, this kid's got to have this grade or this test score, so we're not going to consider them. Those amount of times I've had conversations with them where you're right, like, hey, we met this young man or this young woman, and like he interviewed great, and we do think he can be a fit here, even if there's this blemish that maybe otherwise might have caused us concern. And like I do think, given the volume of the applicant pool and the size, like I've always admired like it is a place that I think is really thoughtful about that process. And I would imagine with you being there, like you said, the role for your input of like, hey, I think this is a kid who can add to our community, not just as a hockey player, is yeah, I think is something sometimes parents maybe don't understand that's what this conversation is about. It's not just numbers on a page.
Absolutely. And I would tell you this, and one thing that I've noticed being here for a week now, um, there it because our campus is so unique and it's integrated with the town,
Yeah,
and it's not an enclosed campus with gates and clear delineation of, hey, on campus, off campus. There's a 2 mile radius here of students can freely go as they
yep,
wish. And there's people that live in town and there's businesses and there's a downtown and there's restaurants and bookstores and coffee shops and retail shops. Like it takes a level of maturity and responsibility to be successful here versus maybe some other schools where there's
for sure.
bumpers.
Yep,
You know what I mean? So as I've said, I don't want to have to babysit, right? I don't want to have to be worrying about a player when I'm at home with my family, worrying about what they're doing. So I do believe, from an admissions perspective, part of that process is evaluating can this player or can this student be a good citizen within the Exeter community? Do you know what I mean? Because you have to. it does take a level of responsibility and maturity and mindset to be able to make good decisions within that, you know?
Yeah, I always tell families the best analogy I've always kind of come up with is like, I think at all boarding schools, the great thing about it is you've got a lot of adults who care about kids. And there is always a safety net for kids in all of these boarding school communities. The difference at a place maybe like Exeter is um, the the net's a little bit maybe further down where you're going to get caught as opposed to a smaller school where they're going to be because of the size and the structure and maybe the profile of the students, the you know, I think teachers are going to be a little bit more proactive in intervening when they need to be. And so you're right. Like, I think Exeter is a place where they're really thoughtful about like, hey, is this student mature enough and capable enough of finding success here? And like, I always go back to that with families. Like, it's not about your grades, not necessarily just about your test scores. It's do they think you can be successful? And if they do, and you know, like you said, and you're getting support from a coach, like the likelihood of you having an opportunity there is going to be high. But it's about demonstrating your ability to be successful.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. I agree. And it's like I said, I think it's exciting. I think it's exciting. I'm excited to try to find those student athletes that fit that mold.
So we'll wrap up here. But like you've got uh, so an older group coming for this season coming back. So tell me about that. You got to be excited because it's got to be a good group you've got.
Yeah, I am. I am excited. I think it's a catch 22, right? I think it's a challenge having 18 seniors,
Right.
uh, but it's also an opportunity for us to have success my first year with a group that I don't know, right?
Right.
I've inherited everybody. The video that I've watched, I think we return a very good core. And I think we're going to be, as I've told the guys, our goal from day one, everything that we do is geared towards we're going to be an Elite Eight team. And
Yep.
so, that's my goal. Frankly, it's a high goal, it's a lofty goal, but it's one that we need to operate to every day. And I expect to have success with this group. And as I've told them, I want to make sure their senior year is their most memorable year of hockey. And so that's one piece of it. And I think as far as leadership on campus, it's we talk about the balancing act of being a good citizen, good student. I think returning that core group will mitigate any issues that we might have. It's going to be nice to have a low maintenance group for my first year with a lofty goal.
Yeah. No, I would. Yeah, I think you're, and also with that group having that kind of success, of which from everything I've heard, like I talked to some coaches too who feel like, yeah, it's gonna be a good group, allows you to kind of build on that success as you're bringing in this a much larger group for the following year. So,
Yeah,
um,
I think they went through a challenge last year and transition, and I think they're all excited. The players, the parents, they're excited to have a good structured college-like mindset going into this coming year. So we've already made some good changes. We've got a great fall program set up, and we're excited to get things going.
so yeah, what will your fall program look like? Because as you now know, it's depending, every school's got a different plan. So like what's
Very,
yours look
very
like?
similar, very similar to um, Dexter, Cushing,
Got it.
Holderness. They, we have, we've worked a partnership or relationship with the River Rats organization. The
Yep.
River Rats have created the New Hampshire River Rats. And so the group will play together as the New Hampshire River Rats based on campus here. So we've hired outside coaches have been hired by the River Rats. They'll practice here, train here, and then play a full fall schedule as a group, which will
Yep.
certainly help springboard us and provide us a great foundation heading into November.
Yeah, and the great thing I think about that model, which I've seen, like I know Berkshire did that as well, some of those other
Yeah, that's
schools,
right. They did
is
that. Yep.
um, while initially it may not have seemed it, I know talking to some coaches, what they've really liked about it is it's allowed their students in the fall to actually remain integrated on campus because they're not leaving to go to practice, and also because of the great facilities that all these schools have, but like particularly you guys, you have an unbelievable facility. Like you
Yeah.
have those kids have home games, right? So it's not like all of they're still around for the activities on the weekends and able to be a part of the community and give it a level of control that I think when I was coaching at Berkshire, we struggled to try and find ways to not feel like allowing kids to play fall hockey was a choice for them to isolate out of the community in the fall. And I think
Right.
now like a setup like that is great.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think the being able to create they're still on campus, right? The schedule has been designed so that they they make football games, they make student
Right,
activities, they're not gone for the Exeter Andover Day. Like there's a balance, and they're not playing every weekend, right?
right.
We've created where there's weekends off, and they're here during the week. Like it's a really good setup. I'm excited about it, and fortunate that our administration was supportive of going in a different direction.
That's great. Well,
Yeah,
I appreciate you taking the time. I'll see you on in the first week of August on
yeah,
campus for
absolutely.
for
Looking
your
forward to
event.
having you at the camp and speaking.